Hey First Baptist, I know we have some gluten-free folks, so today I'm going to put together a quick, rustic, gluten-free cracker that you can use for your weekly communion. Let's get started. First things first, preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. This recipe calls for 5 simple ingredients. I've got a cup of brown rice flour, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. We're going to use a half teaspoon of salt, an 1/8 teaspoon of smoked paprika, and somewhere between 4 and 8 tablespoons of water. All right, I've got my flour, salt, paprika, and olive oil in a bowl, and I'm just going to mix it up with my hands until the oil is really well distributed. So this is going to feel kind of like wet sand when you get it all distributed. All right, I'm gonna add water to this mixture, and I'm just gonna do it a tablespoon at a time because I don't want the mixture to get too wet or it'll be sticky. I really just want to make a dough form. So I'm gonna continue to do this by hand. You can see some of it starting to clump into a dough, but until I can sort of make all of this into one big ball, I'm just gonna add a little bit more water at a time. All right, so this is all coming together in one nice ball of dough. I ended up using just over 4 tablespoons of water in mine, but the recipe says somewhere between 4 and 8. So you're just gonna have to feel it out, and when it all sticks together nice and feels like you can roll it out, then you're there. All right, so we are gonna bake our crackers on a parchment-lined pan, and to make things super easy, we're gonna roll the dough out directly onto the parchment that we're going to use to bake. So you can see how the corners of my parchment paper are kind of rolling up here and it's hard to stay in place. I'm just going to flip that over so that those rolled edges are down and things will stay in place much better. All right, one of the nice things about parchment paper is that it actually is compostable. So you can either recycle the bits that you don't use or you can throw them in your compost. So we have our pre-cut parchment paper that's ready to go on our pan, and we've got our dough. I'm just gonna beat it down a little bit with a rolling pin to get it into a flatter disc so that we're not starting out with a ball. You can also just kind of mash it with your hands. You can see that it's really crackly. Don't worry about it. This is a rustic cracker, so we don't have to worry about things being perfectly smooth. I'm just gonna roll this out until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. You can see sometimes the dough likes to stick in places. If you look at how shiny this rolling pin is, there really is enough oil in the dough that it typically tends to come back off. So if you get a divot, you can just place it back down with your fingers or try and roll back over it with the rolling pin to see if it will go back in place. If you get cracks, you can also press those with your fingers. Again, we're not looking for anything super perfect here, so no worries about what it looks like. I am using my custom-made French rolling pin that Connie Williams made for me, and this is the first time I've ever used it, so I think it's working pretty well. Thanks, Mom. Okay, at this point we have 2 options. We can actually use a pizza cutter to just cut this into squares, or we can leave it whole and then break it into kind of more rustic pieces once we're finished. So I'm gonna opt for that option. We're gonna leave it whole, and so I'm just gonna slide this onto my baking pan and we'll be ready to put it in the oven. And we're just gonna bake this again at 400 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. Our cracker is out of the oven and it's had a chance to cool down. So now I'm just going to break it into small pieces to use for communion. You can see it did get quite brown, so keep an eye on it. This was in the oven for about 20 minutes. This was my first time making these crackers, and I did learn a few things. You want to roll this dough out as thin as you can get it because it's going to be a really crispy cracker, and if it's thick, then it's going to be pretty tough to eat. So you want it to be as thin as it can be. You also should keep an eye on it in the oven. I had mine bake for 20 minutes. I'd say that was a little bit long, so probably a better option would be to set your timer for 15 and check it after 15 just to make sure it's not getting too brown. You do want it to be crispy, but not over brown. These tasted pretty good, actually, but I would probably sprinkle them with some salt before putting them in the oven. You might even add some other herbs if you like. Things like dried rosemary, I think would be really good in these crackers. So if you want to flavor them up a bit and make your communion experience a little bit tastier, that would be a way to do that. I have listed the ingredients here on the screen for you so you can see exactly what you'll need to pull this off. Really no special equipment. This is a pretty easy project, and you can have your communion crackers ready in somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes. This was really quick to put together. Hope you enjoy.